going on to all my Barrie fans out there, and welcome back to my channel, MovieFiles. We are back discussing this fourth and final season of Barrie, breaking down episode 3 titled You're Charming. Now, the theme of this episode seemed to be about honesty and trust, and that's the last thing we saw these characters displaying because they were lying to each other, turning their backs on each other, and wanting to kill one another, which, speaking of killing, we get a massacre at the end of this episode, and it's safe to assume that Barrie has escaped prison. We got so much to talk about in today's spoiler breakdown, but first, I want to know what you all thought about episode 3, from your favorite moment, funniest moment, your thoughts on the ending, and what deeper meanings or Easter eggs did you all find, and of course, share your theories and your predictions of what you all hope to see in the weeks ahead. Now, if you all appreciate today's breakdown, consider hitting that like button as well as sharing today's breakdown, and of course, consider subscribing to the channel. With all that being said, we got an episode 3 to talk about, full spoilers ahead. As we open the episode with Hank and Cristobal's crew celebrating after getting their high-quality sand, and surprise, surprise, we get officially introduced to Toro, who, as I mentioned in my video last week, may be played by the director Guillermo del Toro, and yes, it is indeed him, as Toro has his best man on the job to kill Barrie, and he made sure that it didn't interfere with their popular podcast schedule. And let me tell y'all something, hearing Guillermo del Toro talk about the difference between hearing someone's voice on a podcast versus seeing their face on a TikTok, and then clicking a link in their description to see the gadgets on their YouTube video, that just made my day. One of the funniest moments of this episode. But look, that wasn't the only surprise that Hank got in this third episode, as he is meeting his old associate Batar, who is still alive. I thought that he died in last season's episode 5 raid by the police. Now, Batar gives his friend a warning about the elders coming to take down Hank if he doesn't decide to end this empire with Cristobal and rejoin his team, and if he doesn't, they will completely wipe them out. Now, the question is, what will Hank do with this? Will he decide to end this empire with the love of his life, or will he go to war with the elders? Now, I personally think the way Hank was moving in this episode, I think he wants all the smoke. I think he is willing to go to war with the elders. Let me know what you all thought about that. But let's check in with what's going on with Sally in this episode, because her story wasn't as connected to all the chaos, which we'll be talking about a little bit later. Now, this is the first day of her class, of her being this new teacher, coaching these new up-and-coming actors, and she immediately asks these students if they only signed up because of who she is, and they tell her that no, that's not the case, and they honestly took her side in the situation. Now, I didn't know if they were just being fake and being just dishonest, because that was the theme of this episode, about honesty and truth. And we know this is Hollywood. People always want to get over on someone, and maybe they want to just be there to capture her snapping again. But as of right now, it seems like they were being honest, and this level of acceptance for her from her students gave Sally the confidence she needed to kind of lead this course, and she wants them to jump into their scenes. And we see their scenes, and they're not the best of actors, if we're being honest, but she comes across this new student by the name of Kristen, who is very charming, and I think Sally might have seen a little bit of herself in Kristen, as she gives her literally the exact same speech that Jean gave her back in episode 1 in season 1 of Barrie, and she gets in her face, and all of this kind of tension and abuse gets the best out of Kristen. Now, this time around, the students aren't really here for that type of activity, as they call this verbal abuse, and because of this, they don't want a part of this class. They tell Sally, just because you were taught that way doesn't mean we have to be taught the same thing. And this, to me, is yet another example of when Barrie does such a great job of incorporating today's environment into his show, especially with handling different topics within the Hollywood industry. We've seen or maybe heard of horror stories of old school directors and producers or actors having method acting and being very problematic on set just to get a great performance. But in today's age of entertainment, those tactics will get you canceled. So I love how Barrie always finds a way to kind of incorporate what's going on in today's pop culture and in today's society, as we see that this whole class has left because of her actions, but the only student that stayed was Kristen, because Sally was the only person to get this best performance out of her, and Kristen has a job that she booked, and she wants Sally to help her. Now, let's talk about this here. I think it's going to be really interesting to kind of see this new dynamic between Sally and this Kristen character, because I don't know, again, truth and honesty is a big theme, and we know these characters can be very manipulative, especially Sally, so I don't know if she's going to be manipulating Kristen to get back into Hollywood, or if she's going to try to make amends with her past and try to do right by her. But here's what I'm going to put in my crazy theory into the conversation. Stick with me here. What if we are witnessing Kristen being some type of new version of Barrie? What if she is like an ex-assassin herself, now wanting to be an actor, and she gets this job, she becomes famous for a little bit, but then all of a sudden she gets a call to do a hit job, and it's to kill Barrie. Now I know that's a very far stretch, but again, I just couldn't shake how it was almost so similar, how she has this new job all of a sudden, even though she might not be the best actress. And we know that was the same thing with Barrie. He was getting gigs all of a sudden. So I don't know where they're going with this Kristen character. I don't know if we're going to see like a friendship between Kristen and Sally. Maybe it's going to get Barrie jealous. Maybe there's going to be some type of romance, and maybe Barrie is going to kill Kristen. Let me know what you all think about this new character and if she will be an important character. And I know, listen, it's only 5 episodes left. It's the final season, so we might not get this whole she's an assassin type of plot going on, but I have my suspicions on her moving forward. But I want to know your thoughts in the comments section. But let's check in on what's going on with Gene in episode 3 as he learns that Barrie has recently cut a deal and he is straight up frightened for his life. He has the attorney tell him that there's enough evidence on their side that they'll be okay, but as long as they keep their mouth shut, and Gene in particular keep his mouth shut, everything will be fine. But we know as an audience that unfortunately we have crossed that road, and Gene has already opened up his mouth to that reporter, which, speaking of, we see him coming clean with his agent Tom as he crashes into the car, and now the action at hand is to stop this article from coming out. Switch over to seeing Gene and Tom breaking into the O'Neill's house, and they're making a complete mess, arguing. Seeing them together was just hilarious. But while this is all happening, Mrs. O'Neill hears all this commotions inside. She's talking to Gene, who's all cool, calm, and collective. He just wants to check on O'Neill, make sure he's okay after getting into this Barry Berkman case. But then she tells Gene that she hasn't heard from her husband all day, and she's kind of concerned because the last time she spoke to him, he was going to be meeting with one of the victim's father, and you see the look on Gene's face as he knows exactly who she's referring to. And again, the fear of God is put in this man's heart. Which, speaking of that victim's dad, let's switch over to Jim Moss as we see the reporter who's consistently persistent. He pays a visit to Jim and catches him up with everything, with him talking to Barrie in this episode. He talks about speaking with Gene, which leads Jim to inviting the reporter in his garage. My goodness, I love Jim Moss so much. We see Jim cleaning out his trunk as Gene pulls up with Tom, and he immediately leaves and pulls off as Gene is talking to Jim, and Jim tells him that he can't be trusted and he needs to be isolated. And we see Gene kind of blaming this whole situation on him just having stage fever. That's why he talked to O'Neill. But listen, Jim isn't having it. Which, speaking of O'Neill, we cut to him who's completely speechless. He is spooked out of his mind, and he's now all of a sudden speaking German, and he never spoke German a day in his life. I love that scene so much, and I just want to talk about this here. I am dying to see another scene with Jim and Barrie. We got it last season, but I just want to see them actually have a conversation, and I'm just very curious to see maybe Jim can break Barrie down. And also this idea of Jim isolating Gene. What exactly does that mean? Because I recall seeing the trailer for this season, and there's a scene in the trailer where we see Gene, who appears to be in some type of cabin by himself, but then someone kind of pops up out of the shadows and he's all scared and frightened, which I don't know if that's Jim that he's scared of, or maybe Barrie finds him, which would be a very cool kind of full circle moment, because what if this cabin is the same cabin that Janice died at? So that would be something very interesting to see. And going back to O'Neill, I think it's safe to assume that he won't be submitting his article anytime soon, or maybe his wife's going to get involved, but neither here nor there. Jim is such a badass, Gene is such a dumbass, and I'm very curious to see what comes of O'Neill. Let me know your thoughts on all of that, but let's see what's going on with Barrie and Fuchs in this episode, or should I call them Charlie and Raymond. Barrie has given the FBI what they needed with the details of Cristobal and Hank and the Empire, them being in love, and since Barrie has held up his end of the deal, they are going to continue to help Barrie and Sally be in witness protection program. Barrie gets a visitor, the reporter O'Neill, who O'Neill just wants to get Barrie's side of the story, and Barrie finds out that Gene has given his side of the story to this reporter about killing Janice, kidnapping him and threatening his family. This is where Barry is slightly confused about the conversation at hand, and I'm telling myself, I'm like, Barry, please stop talking, because he's telling a reporter he apologized to Gene, he has a deal in place with the FBI, and I'm like, Barry, please be quiet. But he snaps in front of the reporter and he tells the reporter to tell Gene to shut his mouth, which leads into what is going on with Fuchs as we see him being made fun of in prison because he doesn't have Barry anymore. He's being called all these different names. He calls Hank as Fuchs learn that Barry's days are numbered and he will be killed by the end of the day. And Hank tells Fuchs that do not intervene. If he does, he'll get paid. Now, in this moment here, I wasn't sure if Barry was starting to get paranoia knowing that he's having this deal and maybe people know about this deal, because we see Barry in this kind of private area in this courtyard arguing with himself, but then there's like a mysterious person there with him. Now, at first, I didn't know if that was one of Toro's men or just happened to be someone there. This invokes Barry to giving Hank a call, and this was one of my favorite moments of this episode. Hank believes he's calling about the attempted hit on Barry's life, but instead, Barry is calling Hank to take care of Gene. Now, by taking care of Gene, I didn't know if Barry was just simply implying to shut Gene up, scare him for he won't talk anymore, or if Barry was flat out giving Hank the orders to killing Gene because of the information that Gene has, and Barry is using that again. The whole theme is lies, deceit, and being dishonest. So he's using this to try to get Hank to, again, shut up Gene or maybe kill Gene. And taking a step back there, I'm so surprised if this is to be assumed that he wants Gene to be killed. He's putting a hit out on Gene. It's so crazy to see this side of Barry. Now, we've seen Barry get dark, don't get me wrong, but this is the person that he loves. This is kind of a father figure to him. And I think this is just another great example of the show reminding us that Barry isn't a good guy. He does have a dark side. He is willing to kill his friends, to snitch on his friends. We are seeing this right in front of us. So I love that this show reminds us that, again, Barry is not a good guy as he appears to think that he is. But getting back into the conversation, we see Hank confronts Barry online after Hank already knows everything that's going on. He tells Barry, after all the kindness, lie to me, and the back and forth between these two as Barry tells him, I am a good person. I'm always looking out for my friends. And then Hank brings up again that he knows about him being in cahoots with the feds, and seeing Hank and Barry exchanging threats to one another, but more impressively, Hank giving it back to Barry and standing his ground and hanging up on Barry. I loved it. I loved it so much. But getting into the actual breakdown of this moment, I felt like we were watching the reverse of Barry and Fuchs, but instead Barry accepts all the lies. He knows that Fuchs is playing him, but he just plays along with it. But I love that Hank, once he knows that Barry is snitching on him and not being honest, he instincts right then and there. So I really appreciated Hank stepping up for himself. But if I'm being honest to you all, it hurt my heart to see Hank and Barry going against each other, because some of my favorite scenes of this show is when they're on the same page, being good old pals, but I don't think that that's going to be seen anymore in the rest of this season. But let me know what you all thought about that incredible scene, which brings us to wrapping up the episode, where we see Fuchs is watching the incredible film Rain Man, and he sees a little bit of himself and Barry in their relationship. But my question is, in Fuchs' mind, who's in control? Is he the Charlie of the situation? Is he Raymond? Let me know what you all thought about that. But this leads Fuchs to, once again, caring for Barry. He goes to the guards. He tells them that Barry is about to be killed, but the guards ignore him. They tell him to shut up and sit down. Fuchs, instead, he yells it across the whole prison that Barry's about to be killed and no one's doing anything about it as he gets taken down, which leads us to Barry being introduced to Agent James Curtis. And while this conversation is happening, I couldn't help but to notice that I think the feds were just going to screw Barry over. Like when he brought up, oh, is Sally going to be moving along? And then you could see that Curtis had no idea who Sally was, but he was just playing along. So I think it was safe to assume that they were going to screw him over ultimately at the end of the day. But again, honesty and truth is mentioned in this scene as we get another incredible cameo by the incredible Fred Armisen, who is sweating and freaking out because he is here to kill Barry. And oh my goodness, this scene here just caught me off guard as it goes horribly wrong. He pulls out, I assume, like a little gun that was in a pen as he blows his fingers off, which, by the way, I don't know how he got past the security guards with that weapon, but blows off his fingers. We see a man coming from the ceiling and taking out all the agents in the room. So that deal that Barry had, I assume, is no longer in play because all the players involved are now dead. They've been assassinated. As we see, Barry grabs a shield, the Wonder Woman shield, out of nowhere, grabs a gun, kills the hitman in the ceiling. And my goodness, again, that went from 0 to 100. The show never fails to disappoint as the alarms have now been pulled. And all hell is breaking loose, and the guards, who I assume are walking with the warden, as they arrive to the room to find all the dead bodies except for the hitman who's still alive with his missing fingers. But speaking of missing, I assume that Barry has escaped prison. My goodness, what a great way to end this episode. Again, that just did such a great job of showing these relationships falling apart, new relationships maybe fostering into new things, or maybe being built on lies and deception. And again, Barry's on the run. So will he be paying a visit to Sally in hopes that she'll go on a run with him? Overall thoughts of this episode, I really appreciated the setup that we got here, whether you look at Jim and Barry inevitably coming face to face. Indeed, the case that Barry has escaped, will he be coming to Jean first? Now, leaving Fuchs to potentially being in trouble with the guards, they probably think that he has something to do with it. And I think I remember seeing in the trailer of the season, someone was getting beat up by the guards. I think that was probably Fuchs. Now, at first I thought it was Barry, but I think they're going to end up beating up Fuchs, trying to get information out of him. Going back to that Sally and Kristen relationship, will this be a good relationship for Sally? Will she use her? Will there be jealousy involved with Barry finding out about this? And going back to the Barry of it all, again, who will Barry pay a visit to first? Will it be Jean? Will it be Sally? Or will it be Hank? Well, speaking of Hank, will he tell Cristobal about the warning for the elders? Will they stand their ground? Will they break up their empire? Let me know your thoughts on that, but I want to give out some awards, and I want to do this for the rest of this season. I want to share with you all my favorite scene, and that was a couple of my favorite scenes in this episode. Number one, the Guillermo del Toro explaining a podcast and TikTok and YouTube links. That was just so funny to me. Followed up by O'Neill speaking German and that massacre at the end of the episode. Those are my 3 top tier scenes in this particular episode. Let me know your favorite moments of tonight's episode. And also, I want to highlight some of my favorite performances, and that is from no other the Barry and the Hank scene. Seeing them on the phone, threatening one another. We've seen both of them get violent before, but never towards each other. So I just love that scene, and I just think the performances of the show is absolutely fantastic. So those are my thoughts on episode 3, my favorite scenes, my favorite acting performance, and again, Barry's on the run, y'all. What can we expect next? That's where you all jump in. Let me know your thoughts in the comment section. Again, your favorite moments, funniest moments, your thoughts on the ending. Is Barry, has he escaped prison? Who will he visit next, and what will shake out in the coming weeks? Let's have those conversations below. Thank you all for watching today's breakdown. I really appreciate you all. If you all had a good time, again, hit that like button, share today's breakdown, leave your thoughts in the comments, and of course, come and join the community by hitting the picture on the screen now with my face. Join this awesome community. Check out my other reviews for Barry. Check out my most recent review. We'll catch you all on the next breakdown.